Welcome to Social Butterfly, the program that will bring the most amazing media industry guests to give us insight to the media industry. I'm your host, Dion.
And I'm Clara.
And today we would like to introduce our special guest, world-class political commentator, Leon Emirali.
In this episode, we will explore Leon's impressive career through his study, his professional experiences in media and communication, and also his point of view on the media industry. We are also very fortunate that we have an experienced and successful person to talk to when it comes to this. Thank you for welcoming our dear guest, Leon.
So, Leon, we did some research about you and we found out you're an ex-media and communication student here at Coventry University.
Yeah.
So, we want to know, what would you say are the best skills that a media and communication student should take into such a congested industry?
Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me. And I have to say, this is an incredibly impressive setup, and the place has changed for the better immensely since I graduated in 2012, so thank you for that. I think it's a really good question that you asked, Dion, because when we go into the world of work, suddenly you find yourself competing with not just your peers from Coventry University, but tons of other universities in the UK and around the world. So I think the most important thing is to differentiate yourself whilst at university. You've got 3 years to essentially begin building your portfolio, begin building your network as much as you can, and use that so you've got some experience to talk about when you go into the world of work. I think employers are understanding that you can't have a wealth of experience fresh out of university, but there are certain things you can do that give you that sort of extra inch or two on your competitors when you do go out into the workplace. So I'd say just say yes to every opportunity that you get that comes your way, and build something that gives you something to talk about when you eventually get there.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. But we know that it can be sometimes really hard for students to find what the kind of job will suit them. So we want to know how and when did you know you wanted to pursue as a public relation as a career, and what initial step did you take to achieve this?
So I think I knew really when I took on the course that I wanted to have a career in PR. I wasn't actually entirely sure what PR was, and I'm still not entirely sure what PR is, because lots of people have different understandings of what it is, and it does have multiple definitions depending on who you speak to. But I think I really wanted to be involved in the media. I think I was passionate about media. I was a news junkie, if I'm honest with you. I used to get up and I'd get the newspapers, I'd have Sky News, BBC News just rolling while I was writing an essay or whatever it might have been on some coursework. So I was constantly sort of immersed in that world, and eventually decided actually this is something that I think I'd really like to do as a career. I had a bit of a waver because, as I say, you come out of, I graduated 2012, the economy was just about recovering from big recession we had in 2008, and you start thinking, yeah, PR agencies are rejecting me, or I'm not getting these jobs, and it takes a little while to eventually then find somewhere that takes a punt on you. And at that point I thought, well, is there something else I can do? Maybe there's another career that I can do, because ultimately you've got to pay the bills, you've got to find your way in life. But thankfully the opportunity came about. But I think I knew I wanted to do it early doors, and that was really helpful to me because I was able to create that portfolio whilst at university, to begin making myself attractive to those types of employers in that industry. So it was really helpful to have that clarity early doors.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that's very insightful, especially for us second years. Like, having that insight gives us that extra clarity that if we want something, we kind of have to make sure we get our foot in that door, continuously continue going on. But as we're speaking about your media career, what made you transition into politics?
So, being a news junkie, politics is obviously a massive part of the news. There's barely any news bulletin or newspaper that isn't going to carry a political story as one of its main sort of facets of that particular story of the day. So, politics became something I was interested in through just being interested in current affairs. And I've never been really ideological with politics, and I grappled with that. Am I left wing? Am I right wing? Am I somewhere in the middle? And I never really got the answer to it. But the opportunity to work in government sort of came by chance in a way. And it was during Brexit. It was during I was working with the Brexit secretary. That was the job offer. I voted Remain. So I was like, okay, I don't necessarily want to deliver this policy, but it's a chance that I don't think I'm going to get any other point in my life. Those opportunities don't come around often. So I just thought, I'll go with it, I'll hold my nose, and I'll try and make the best of a worst case. And then went in working directly with the Brexit Secretary at that point. So I've always been interested in politics. The fact that it kind of converged was almost by luck and by accident. It was more about media, but obviously the intersection between media and politics is massive. And it just felt like a natural fit for me to be able to work there and you know, be able to have my say and have my mark in a very small way.
Okay.
Wow.
So as you truly said, politics and media are really linked together, and we know that Brexit was a main topic for many years in England and even in all the European Union. So it was a big change for the country, but for you personally, what did you learn about politics during this time as head to the Brexit Secretary?
Well, I think I had hair before I started working in Westminster, and now I don't. So I think that tells you what it meant to me. It was an incredibly stressful period for the country, but obviously if you're in the thick of it, imagine the stress that we were under at that time. And it wasn't easy because it was a time of division in the country. It still is a time of division, really. It's still something that divides people. So it was trying to please as many people as you can, whilst not ultimately, you know, having to abide by what was voted for democratically. So it was a real sort of grapple between what was the right thing to do democratically and what was the right thing to do for the country. My job was to try and, as the media advisor, media aide, was to try and appease the country in a way and say to the Brexiteers, you're getting your Brexit, say to the Remainers, it isn't going to be as bad as you think it's going to be. Whether that succeeded or not, I don't know, but it was all about also communicating the changes that if you run a small business, what you'll see. If you live abroad or you travel abroad or have family members abroad, what are those changes and how can you prepare for them? So it was all about preparing that information, communicating it back to the public, and that was a real challenge.
And can you say you achieved this challenge, or?
I don't know. I mean, I can't say it's all on me at all because I was only a small part of it, you know, tiny part of it. I think there could have been things that were done better. I do think the country remains divisive, and I think that the political upheaval, changing of prime ministers, changing of policies sort of at the last minute, I don't think has been good for the country as a whole. So I think that has been one of the key things that's been really disappointing in a way. But I do think we're now, hopefully, after what are we now? We're 2024. 2016 was when the vote happened. I'm hopeful that we're starting to put that behind us and can move on and make the most of the situation that we find ourselves in now.
I think talking back to the point where you were talking about how different prime ministers were coming in and how the media were interpreting it, how did you deal with such hard, for example, we had Boris Johnson who came in after Theresa May and David Cameron and trying to deal with the world of COVID and also Brexit and trying to go through that. But also there was a lot of press releases from Daily Mail, Sun, basically all very negative rather than kind of appreciating how we're trying to juggle everything that's been left in a mess. How would you think the media could have gone about it in a better way?
I don't think they should have done, Dion. I think the media's job is to scrutinise powerful people, and you know the government ultimately are the most powerful people in this country at the moment. So I think their job was to scrutinise, and they did so by their political lens. I mean, those of us who study media, we know that the Daily Mail have got a right-wing lens, we know the Guardian have got a left-wing lens. They're going to come at it from different perspectives, and that is their prerogative. They owe that to their readers to make sure that they are scrutinising the politicians properly. So, you know, I think there was a bit of the tone of some of the coverage, I think, was slightly beyond the pale. So when the Daily Mail had their headline of the High Court judges, or Supreme Court judges, and it was enemies of the people. Yeah. I think that type of language is very divisive and isn't helpful to anyone. But ultimately, you know, we have a free press in the UK. I think that's a really important thing that we sometimes take for granted, is that the press can write whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. I think if you had a press that was only dictated to you by the government, I think that's a far worse alternative. So you have to protect the free press, but there also does have to be some level of responsibility on their part. They aren't stoking flames of division. But on the whole, I think their job is to scrutinise and hold government to account, and that's what they do.
Wow. So it's directly linked with public relation. And don't have any definition, but Diane, can you maybe give one of your definition?
So, public relations, from what we have kind of took our time to research, means the collaboration of media and communications and trying to bring out the best reputation of a client. However, since you work in public relations, what is actually the definition by your standard?
What a question. It's such a hard thing to define, and I think because ultimately there are different strands of public relations. So, and it depends really on who your audience is. So you've got what you'd say corporate PR, which is protecting the reputation of the business as a whole, protecting that amongst their corporate stakeholders. So that might be investors, it might be your staff, it might be business partners. So that's sort of your corporate communications, and that could be, for example, there's a new investment in the company, how do we communicate that to the market? Then you've got your consumer PR, which is more about how do we sell a product? How do we get these products into the hands of people who are actually going to buy this stuff? And that's things like, I don't know, floating a giant iPhone down the Thames if you're Apple. They won't do that because it's so cliche, but that type of thing where you can appeal to individuals, showcase a product and make them want to buy it. And then you've got public affairs, which maybe is a strand also of corporate communications, which is primarily communicating with politicians. So if you want to have a tax cut for your industry, if you want to, it's your healthcare company and you want to get your new drug approved, you need to communicate with government, create a level of a campaign or in a way just giving them the information they need to make those decisions. So PR is really difficult. In the short term, in the shortest possible way, I would say it's managing the flow of information from internally within a company to external audiences, whoever they might be.
Wow. Okay, no, it's such a good definition, I think. And in some point, it's maybe linked with marketing.
Yes.
Do you think you can explain on this point?
Yeah, and marketing is another one that is so hard to define because you've got then a number of different practices that fall under marketing. So you've got design, you've got brand, you've got advertising, and public relations is one of those things of the sort of marketing mix, as it were. So it does fall under marketing. I think it's actually more fundamental than marketing because marketing is about shifting a product. So I would say that certainly consumer PR falls under marketing, but I would say that the wider brief of reputation management, of protecting a brand's image, probably falls in communications, which again, you know, communications and marketing is sometimes used interchangeably. But you'll find this as you get out there into the world of work, that the definition of PR is used loosely. And whenever I'm talking to a new client, I'll always say, what's your interpretation of PR? What is it that you want from this? And then you can decide what exactly it is that they're after, rather than just saying PR, because it means so many different things to different people.
That's perfect. So we do have some extra questions we kind of want to know more about. So we took some time to maybe go for your LinkedIn and we discovered you did your year abroad.
Yeah.
And that was doing Mandarin and also I believe French as well.
Yes. No. Well, I did French afterwards,
Right.
but I don't speak at all well. And I know Clara's French. I'm not going to be showing it here today. But I do think that the year abroad was really important for me. It was in China. It was an exchange at the Zhejiang University of Media and Communication that had a link with Coventry University at the time. I'm not sure if they still do, but it was an incredible experience to live, work, study in China. Which was culturally a big shock, but an amazing shock, and you learn so many different things about the world when you take yourself out of your comfort zone, and you meet friends, you meet people who have different perspectives to you. So it was really valuable, I think, for me to be able to go somewhere abroad, study overseas, and again, it's about creating that differentiation between you and the thousands of others who are going to be applying for the same types of jobs, so that you've got something different on your CV that says, well, I went out there, I saw China, and here's what I did. So it was amazing, both from a personal point of view as well as a professional point of view.
And what is the most important thing you learned during this exchange?
Probably to use chopsticks. I think. I think I couldn't before. But no, it was. I think it was more about understanding how the Chinese mediascape operates, very, very different to here. We spoke about a free press, and obviously China has a different model. I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong, but it was just understanding that the role the media has in China is very different to the role that it has in the UK and in Europe and America. So I think it was seeing that up close and seeing how also political discourse is different in China because of the different democratic setup that they've got there. So yeah, it was learning about different cultures, different ways of life, and I think that was probably the most valuable.
So you've been working in the media industry for a while, you've done politics, you've done PR, you've done so many different things. But looking at the current state of the media industry, what do you think the future of it could potentially be?
The future of media. I mean, we've been debating that. We were debating this when I was here as a student, and I think we were incredibly wrong with our predictions as to what we thought media would be like now. But I think it's changing. It's proliferating massively. So whereas back in the day, you would have effectively two opportunities to interface with the world. The newspaper you bought in the morning, and it was usually the same title over and over again. It was always the Daily Mail, it was always the Mirror, whatever it was, and that was how you got your news. And then you got the 6 o'clock news bulletin and the 10 o'clock news bulletin on the BBC, and that was your way of being fed the news. So in a way, we were all receiving the same type of information at any given moment. Now, we're being bombarded with news from so many different sources, and it actually, rather than enlightening people, I think it's confirming our own biases. So if I'm of a right-wing persuasion, I'll buy the Daily Mail, I'll listen to GB News, and I'll follow right-wing commentators on Twitter, and that will be the only news source that I get. So that's just feeding into my worldview. It's just confirming my worldview rather than challenging it. And I think that's one of the differences that has probably been detrimental, is that people's diet of media has changed, that we're consuming the same stuff rather than actually, I'm going to read the Daily Mail and I'm going to read the same story in The Guardian for a different perspective. I'm going to watch GB News and I'm going to watch the Channel 4 for a different perspective. So I think that's probably what's changed, is we can just cocoon ourselves in the same type of media. So in a way, it's a good thing that media is diversified. I think it's great for certainly people who want to work in the media, opportunities to work for a number of different outlets now that perhaps weren't there before, but also make the most of that diversification of media, consume everything rather than just the things that basically confirm your worldview.
Yeah. And another question with the future of media and communication is the impact of the artificial intelligence. What do you think it can change in this industry? Yeah,
so I mean, we don't know yet what artificial intelligence is going to look like. I think it's at such a primitive stage, but ChatGPT is the example that perhaps most of us are familiar with. I think there are some news organisations who are implementing ChatGPT, getting it to write content, getting it to write news articles, because ultimately the measurement of a news outlet now is how many clicks can you generate to your website, and therefore how much ad revenue can you get from those clicks. So if you can turn something around quickly and cheaply without having to pay a journalist, yes, you can get content, but the truth is it's not very good content. So I think we as consumers of media still require people to interpret what's happening in the world, give their opinion as a human being. Because you could get ChatGPT to write you something on what's happening in Ukraine or in Israel or in Palestine. You can get ChatGPT to write you and it will give you the facts. But what we want to hear is, how did it make you feel as a human? You know, how did it make you feel when you saw that devastation or whatever it was? And I think you can't get that from artificial intelligence yet. Yeah. I think that has to come from a human. So I'm not sure that journalists and people operating in the media are entirely at risk at this point, but certainly news organisations are experimenting with AI, and I think it is going to become something that challenges them maybe in the next decade or so. But I think for now, we're okay.
Yeah, for now. We
now.
We will wait to see. Yeah. So now we are here. It's a little interview, but you did a lot of appearance in big media, such as the BBC. So we want to know how you under the stress, or what kind of preparation you take before appearing in such media.
Yeah, so it's a part of my job that I do regularly. So probably once or twice a week, I'll speak on live television, and it is quite thrilling. It's quite exciting. Preparation's important because you don't want to look like an idiot on live TV with potentially thousands of people watching. So the key thing really is to keep across what's going to be discussed. You were very helpful in that I was given some of the questions you were going to ask me today. That was a luxury because you never get that in the real world. It will just be you go straight in and you have to answer it. So I think you have to keep on top of things regularly, which I do anyway because that's what you have to do when you work in public relations. But certainly making sure that you're able to speak confidently and fluently on whatever topic it is. And if you're not, say no to it, because the worst thing is you're going to find yourself in a difficult situation. Yeah, it is a really important part of what I do is preparing for the interview, because the interview itself lasts about 3-4 minutes. The preparation is probably an hour or two, so it is really important part of it.
And you sent some photos of you doing interview. Do you have some interview you prefer, or
I think
not really?
A lot of interviews now are done on Zoom, so often I'll be at home, and I have to say that's probably a bit more nerve-wracking because you've got the potential of becoming a meme where your cat walks in, or something happens, and then you just go viral for all the wrong reasons. So in a way, that's a bit more nerve-wracking when you're doing it at home, and the internet might drop out, and whatever it might be. So those ones I think I prefer less, but being in the studio, I think as we are here, there is a thrill, there is an exhilaration of being in front of a TV camera and having the human interaction as well with interviewers. So definitely prefer in studio to via Zoom. But it's cheaper for the news organisations now. They don't have to pay for your transport. They don't have to pay to get you in for whatever, do your makeup. So that's all done. I say hair and makeup, which is makeup for me. But that's all done now on Zoom, and it is cheaper for them and quicker. So I get why they do it.
That's absolutely amazing. I feel like we've learnt so much.
Yeah.
I feel like this has been more insightful.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you for such riveting answers to all our questions. But the next portion of the show, we want to give it over to the audience, get them asking you some questions, see what they want to hear from you. So we're allowing our amazing guest liaison and production assistant to go around, give people questions and see what happens. Are we ready, audience?
Yes!
So different question.
Oh, here we go. First person.
In your opinion, what is the impact of media on politics?
So I think politicians need the media, and the media need politicians. So I think for a politician to have any type of cut through, you need them to be able to interact with the media, to get their message across, to be able to explain their policies directly. And for the media, they need politics because they want to cover the news, they want to, as I said, hold them to account. So I think there's such an interaction between both facets of media and politics that we are seeing a bit of a revolving door now where MPs are becoming TV presenters or working in the world of news, which you wouldn't have seen previously, but we do now because it is so interlinked. And in a way, politicians, their main job is to be accountable. They don't write the policy papers, they don't do the stuff that the departments do, they just oversee it and they're accountable for it. So the best way to be accountable is through interactions with the media where journalists can ask questions on people's behalf. So I think it's essential, and it's getting closer and closer, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think before we ask the next question, I do think we want to share some of the photos you did send in so the audience can see what you've been up to. So let's see if they're going to appear. So the BBC, do you want to quickly run us through this one, give us some more insight?
This one was during that chaotic period of Liz Truss's mini budget, when I think at this point Kwasi Kwarteng, who was the Chancellor at the time, was flying back from America to be sacked, but he didn't know he was about to be sacked. So I think it was quite difficult at this point because I wasn't sure whether he was going to be sacked either, but there was speculation. So you're effectively having to tread water for a little bit until it's confirmed that that's what's happened. So a lot of speculation. The cat didn't walk in at that point, so that was good. But yeah, it was one of those interviews where it was very much a really big story.
Okay.
The government was collapsing, the economy was collapsing, and it's the type of story you want to be part of because it's so big.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay. Maybe another question after.
Lovely audience. Who's next? Perfect.
How did it feel to win PR Week's 30 Under 30?
It was nice. It was good. Hello. It was a real honour really, because for me to be recognised with other people in my industry was really flattering. But I have to say, it's sort of one of those things that you put on your CV and then you move on. It didn't change much, but it was nice to get that recognition, and obviously another line for my LinkedIn profile that these two are meticulously scoured. So yeah, it was very nice.
Okay.
You said earlier about having wished to change things or approach things differently, especially with Brexit. Is there any other examples you could give with the knowledge you have now that you'd like to change?
What would I like to change now? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think Brexit was one of those that was just a one-off. It was always going to be incredibly complicated, and you're never going to please everyone. In fact, you're more likely to annoy more people than you are going to please. So that was particularly tricky. I think ever since, there's always things I look at where I can do better. There's always things I look at where I can improve. But ultimately, you have to be confident in what you're doing, and you have to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't really do it. So yeah, I think Brexit was an anomaly in that case.
Yeah. Okay, great question. Maybe another photo to describe it. So
Same one.
Same mini
one.
budget.
Okay.
Another screenshot. Now the Tory leadership.
So this was when I think this is when Liz Truss resigned, and it was who was going to be the next Tory leader, who's going to be the next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So it was Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, or Penny Mordaunt. This was exciting because it was in the studio, and it is quite something because it's an iconic studio. That it's sort of where where it was announced that the Queen died, where it was announced all these big things that happened. We go to war, whatever it might be, happened in that studio. So. Yeah, it was quite an exciting one, and again, one of those big stories. We're about to get a new Prime Minister. You want to be part of that. It's the type of thing that you want to be commentating on, and I think I predicted Rishi was going to get it, and he did. So I was pleased with that.
Aww,
okay.
that's amazing.
Well, that's amazing. And talking about great thing, what is the highlight of your career so far?
Oh, blimey. Probably the most significant things I've done have been not particularly good things. So working in government, for example, we spoke about Brexit, but also the onset of the pandemic.
Yeah.
The minister I worked with at the time was he was reshuffled at that point. He was in the Treasury, so we were dealing with a lot of businesses and people saying, what am I going to do, because my business is shut and my employer's shut. So the furlough scheme, for example, had to be concocted and communicated. So those are probably the things that are the most consequential things I've done in my career. I mean, it's strange to say that they're a highlight because they're not about things that are positive, but I would say that those are probably the most sort of satisfying, where you're able to genuinely help people and give them the information they need to apply for a loan for their business or to keep their staff paid or whatever it might be. So I think that's where I felt that actually communications has had a real difference on people's lives rather than just selling toothpaste or whatever it might be. So I'd say that.
Okay, no, very interesting. I think we have another.
Yes, and I think it's in the Merritt.
Oh,
Downing Street.
Downing Street, yeah. So it's again really iconic, obviously. And when I worked in government, you get in the back of the minister's car, black Jaguar, and it pulls up at the Downing Street gates, and everyone's sort of thinking, who's that? Who's in the car? And that's quite a rush. And then you drive in, and you end up at Downing Street. So an amazing place to work, very privileged, and obviously in the Houses of Parliament as well. Not everyone gets to see there, but the reality is Downing Street is actually quite a dysfunctional office. Okay. It's a very old building. Heating doesn't work very well. There are mice everywhere, but it's still an office. That's where the number 10 staff work. So it's not the most functional of places, but it's very much iconic and a real privilege to work somewhere like that.
It's historical.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
So maybe a few questions.
Any more questions from our esteemed audience? At the back, lovely.
Which piece of advice would you have like to receive when you were younger?
Which piece of advice would I like to receive when I was younger? I think the saying yes to stuff. I think that's one of the things that I'd like to have heard when I was younger. Sometimes you sort of think, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm worried I might fail or I'm worried it might not work. You will learn from everything that you do, even if it is a failure and even if you don't enjoy it at the time. I mean, there were times when I was living in China where I didn't necessarily enjoy it because I was away from friends and family and it was, a long time and you were a long way away. But looking back, it was an incredible experience. So I think take yourself out of your comfort zone, do say yes to stuff and recognise it's going to be competitive out there when you're looking for jobs. And again, just find those ways to differentiate yourself, and saying yes is one of those ways. Hello.
When you went down the street, did you meet Larry the cat?
I did meet Larry the cat. Yeah, I love Larry the cat. He's adorable. He was on a radiator that had like radiator covers. He was sat on the radiator, lapping up the heat. He's very sweet. I mean, I think he's quite old now, Larry. I hope he gets a state funeral if and when that moment comes. But he's adorable. So yeah, a big fan of Larry.
And guys, if you don't know who Larry the cat is, follow him on Twitter. He's got a good active Twitter account as well. But my actual question for you, Leon, is what is your kind of work style? And do you adopt different styles depending on who you're interacting with and why?
Yeah, I think I'm probably I'm better working alone, if I'm honest. Not that I'm not a team player, but I just feel as though my best work is done alone. And sometimes you need just some thinking space to get some ideas, whether it's a creative idea or whether it's just sort of more functional. But I think I work better in that instance. But certainly there's obviously merit to working with other people to get other ideas and bouncing ideas off one another. But yeah, I'm a bit of a solitary guy, so I prefer working alone.
Yeah, it seems great. But maybe when we are all together, we go further and we can do much bigger project.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's better to work in team, but it's not always easy.
100%.
Yeah.
Why is your website written in third person and is it written for you or is it a technique to be an influencer?
That is a great question. So when I saw that question, I think the reason why I wrote it, I think the reason why it's in third person is because I'm so used to writing websites for other people, so for my clients, where I'll build their website and obviously write about them in third person, and it just became second hand. Okay. But I've changed it to first person because I don't want to look too pretentious. I think it's a really good spot, yeah, I think it was a natural way of thinking. I normally write for other people, so I'll write it like that. But yeah, I have now changed it.
You did your website by your own?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So, but again, that's sort of what I do for clients in a way. So it was part of it. But again, that's another thing I'd recommend to everyone else: buy the domain name for your name and create a bit of a portfolio. Because when you go into an interview, when you hand in your CV, the employer, the first thing they're going to do is Google your name. So if you've got something on there that showcases the work you've done, the stuff that you've been up to, it just puts you in a really good position. It allows you to say more than your CV can if you create a personal website. So I'd recommend everyone does that. It's really cheap. Build a website on Wix or something like that, and it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, because on CV you can lie, but on website you have to be truly yourself and
have your best work.
Yeah, it's more important.
One final question from our lecturer himself.
Oh.
I am also a political junkie, so I could spend quite some time discussing who was better or worse out of Liz, Rashid and Boris. My question is to bring it back to more of the age and ambitions of our audience. What is the best thing or the best advice you got when you were at university? And because we are not perfect, what is the one thing that you wish you had learned at university that perhaps was missing from your time here?
It's a really good question. I think the best piece of advice that I got when I was here, I think was probably I can't remember who told me, but it was to get a job here part-time as soon as possible. And I think that is really important as well. That actually, and I worked at the student union just behind the bar, but it was good advice because your study is important, but also it's good to be able to get into a rhythm of work, which I found I struggled with a little bit at university, coming from school where you've got your timetable set out. And at university, you know, perhaps it's not quite as full on, or you haven't got your day scheduled out for you as much, and you've got a little bit of autonomy as to what you decide to do. So by getting a job, you have that rhythm that I think puts you in really good stead when you go into a full-time job. So that was a really good piece of advice that I got. In terms of what was the question, Dan? Sorry, the second bit.
What you wish you had perhaps learned at university that would have been useful in your career?
Yeah. So do you still do advantage here? Was that some?
Yes.
Yeah. So we learned. Yeah. Same type of reaction I think when we were with it. But it's valuable in a way because you know you do learn things that are outside of the practice area that you're in currently. And you know, I came out of university and I was not by any means an expert in communications, but obviously that's what I'd studied, that's what I knew. But suddenly, I then eventually wanted to get a mortgage, or I then wanted to, you know, had to fill out a self-assessment form when I started a business. Those types of skills, if you're able to learn them here, while you've got the time and ability and the resources to tap into, I would recommend doing that, because when you get into the world of work, trust me, it's going to be full on. Suddenly your time gets sort of sucked up by work. So by learning those things that will be valuable later in life, I think are really good. Personal finance things, small things that maybe you're not quite sure about that are going to become so important when you do get into the world of work. So try and diversify your knowledge to obviously, yes, be an expert in communications and media, but also an expert in those other things that are going to help you along in life.
Okay. And maybe an extra question I have for you before the conclusion is, you think we need to have each work experience in the field we want to work in, or it's not important, it's just the experience who matter?
I think it's important that you have, if you want to work in the world of communications and media, I think definitely try your best to get that experience, because it's really helpful. But also, just try and do interesting things. Work for interesting companies, even if it's not in that field. It's something that when someone reads your CV, they think, oh, that's quite cool. I want to have a conversation with them about that, or I want to learn a bit more about that. Why did they do that? So it's certainly not a disadvantage to have work experience outside of the industry, but obviously it helps because you're able to have a bit of a head start. You sort of know what you're going into, and also it lets you understand if it is what you want to do, because as I said, when I was here, yes, I wanted to work in PR, didn't quite know what it was. Luckily, it turned out that I liked it, I enjoyed it, and it was the career for me. But for other people, you know, you might go into it and think, oh, this isn't what I thought it was, I don't want to do it anymore. It then gives you that time to pivot and change if that's what you want to do.
Okay, so it was really lovely to have you here today, Leon. We have learned so much of interesting facts about you, but also media industry and the most important public relation. We are grateful for this moment, and we hope that you enjoy it as well.
Thank you very much, it was a pleasure.
So I want to say a big thank you for everyone that's tuned in today's episode. I hope you keep up with us more. Please follow us on our social media, where you get to keep up with all the latest episodes and even behind the scene discussions. Thank you.